Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, presented by Community America Credit Union. I am Joel Goldberg, and on today's episode, I'll be catching up with a fellow podcast host whose passion is closing educational opportunity gaps. He began his career as a member of the Peace Corps stationed in Togo, West Africa. While there, he mentored villagers who had ambitions of developing their own businesses, and in the process, identified his own purpose as well. After more than a decade supporting adult education in the Portland, Oregon community, he is now the principal and CEO at Skills Strategy Consulting, as well as the host of the podcast All In Student Pathways Forward. Through innovative skills development programs and workforce training, he is playing a firsthand role in changing the lives of those around him. Thanks to his leadership, upward mobility, and equitable economic prosperity has become a reality for more low-income individuals than ever before. If you find yourself wondering who this remarkable guest is, and by the way, my amazing assistant, Ashley, wrote this. She writes all of them. I don't know that I would have used the word remarkable for this guest. For a shot already fired. But that is because the guest is my very own brother, my only brother. Got a couple brothers-in-law, but my guest is my younger brother, and again, my only brother, Marc Goldberg. See, I don't know if I would ever call him remarkable. Yes, he is indeed. Coming to us from Portland, Oregon, my younger brother, Marc Goldberg. What's up?
I don't think I've ever gotten the broadcast voice talking about your younger brother here. That's impressive,
You've gotten the broadcast voice. Great writing by Ashley, but I thought it would be fun if she wrote it, because otherwise I just would have been more mean-spirited and all that type of stuff. First question, it's an important one. As we record this in advance of when it is released, a couple weeks in advance, have you by any chance told mom, I should say mom or dad, but you know where I'm going with this. Have you told mom that you're going to be on this podcast?
No, I haven't. Have you?
No, I don't think so. I just figured we shouldn't really even tell her until the day it comes out.
Sounds good.
I don't know why. I think she'll enjoy this. I want to know if at any point, we'll get down to business here too, but I want to know if at any point, I want her taking note. You know, she's going to do this now because she's listening, at least when this comes out. I want her taking notes of who she agrees with or disagrees with.
Sounds good. I think she'll just be neutral, impressed that we're having a civil conversation and not fighting.
I mean, we don't know that it'll be civil.
That's true. Out. All right, let's go then.
So I can't say that I never thought about interviewing you, because I knew that you were doing a lot of really important things in the world, and I think that they are elements right now that maybe are more important than ever, just with what's going on with the workforce and I mean, the world's a different place right now, but you've been in this field for a long time. So I certainly could have said, hey, Marc would be a great guest. By the way, you didn't ask to come on. This was my idea, I think, right? I don't think you said, hey, can you have me on to promote my business or my podcast? This was my idea, not yours, right? Not your style to ask for that.
Yeah.
But I think that when I started to see what you were doing with your podcast, the impact you were making, the attention you were getting, and even hearing from some friends in the world of secondary education, that I thought this could be really interesting for people. And then, of course, probably like the second part of the podcast, we'll just probably make fun of each other, and people will learn more about me through you, and vice versa, and all that good stuff. But I want to talk about your career path and your job. But let's start with where you're at right now, because I feel like with all the CEOs I talk to, with everybody in business that I talk to, everyone's talking about workforce right now.
Yeah.
It's a crazy world right now.
Yeah, I think even before the pandemic, but more so now, for individuals to gain jobs and careers that have economic mobility with a living wage, the vast majority require more than a high school equivalency. And I know your world is sports and business, but just your regular job with the Royals, there's a lot of statistics and studying players' stats and team stats. And I guess in my world, still looking at data and just knowing. So Georgetown University has a Center on Education in the Workforce, and during the last recession, the Great Recession, they were able to identify that 99% of Americans who gained employment out of that last recession, 99% of them had more than a high school equivalency. All of those jobs didn't require a university degree, an associate's degree, but the individuals who gained those jobs had more than a high school equivalency. And now we know that same center at Georgetown University has research that shows that 4 to 5 good jobs, which as a baseline of a salary level, require more than a high school equivalency. So I think my experience in community colleges, it's sort of the nexus of how to help younger folks coming out of high school, but also adults who are reskilling, retraining to gain better employment that's going to give them economic mobility. And in Oregon, we've had a whole initiative for about 15 years of what we call stackable credentials. So it's a sort of a model where there's many entry and exit points. So someone can start and do a 6-month program in healthcare that gets their first job in the field, but they can build on those credits to then get an associate's degree, to then continue on and get a bachelor's. But they can also go and get that first job. Maybe their employer then will pay for it, which is even more cost effective. So I think the importance of skills now is critical more than ever. And I think with the pandemic, seeing how it really has had a disparate impact on communities that already had not the same opportunity in the past. So those who were working in low-wage jobs, communities of color, those with the least education, it sort of exacerbated those inequities. So it points even more to the importance of education and training, but also really transforming some of those systems so that it builds an inclusive recovery.
And one of the things that you've told me in recent years too, because I remember a couple years back, I was going to speak, or I did speak at a event for a community college association. I think it was their annual meeting. And, I said, I can give you some pointers on this and that. I mean, a lot of what I speak about culture, leadership applies to really any group, including educators and administrators from community colleges. And you kept telling me over and over again, I'd say, well, what about the kids that go to school? And it's not necessarily kids, it's adults. And I think that I bring that up just because there was always, at least to me, this perceived path of education. Not that that's the same for everyone, but it's like, okay, you go to high school and then hopefully you go to college and then you get a job. And of course, this isn't anything new, whether it's community colleges or different alternatives, but it seems to me as though that is becoming a much more common path, and one that can enable people to pursue whatever their passions or dreams or careers are, whether it be at 18 years old or 48 years old or whatever it might be. How much has that changed?
So I think as we've seen the cost of education skyrocket, particularly university 4-year degrees, it's given a lot of pause because so many individuals have significant debt now. And then they may or may not have the skills from their 4-year degree that's translating to good jobs. Just another data point to throw at you, we were able to gather info in Oregon and identify that there are pre-COVID 448,000 adults 25 to 54 in our state who were either unemployed or working making 15 an hour or less without post-secondary credentials. And we took that and we compared it to the number of high school graduates to see like where is there a talent pool that could help employers fill it. And it would actually take 9 years of high school graduates to get to that number of adults that could, this is pre-COVID, so it's even more now, that could benefit from post-secondary education. So I think to answer your question more directly, I think there are more folks who are not going that traditional route because they see and they're weighing options of, do I want to go in debt and, go 4 years and pay $50,000 a year or $20,000, whatever it is. There's also other options like apprenticeships that have gotten a lot more traction from the federal government and sort of replicating an old model I mean, our grandfather was a tool and die maker, and Zeta went through an apprenticeship. The European model that's been around, but more people are seeing that if they can get into a registered apprenticeship, they actually get a wage. They get an employer sponsoring them, paying them a wage while they're building those skills and taking classes. So I do think there's a lot more folks that are working. Normally during a recession, a lot of there's increases, at least in the community college enrollments, because more people are not working, going back to school. It's very unique now because of COVID, and it's just a different world with classes primarily being online, which has its own issues with digital access. But I think just another thought on this, and it's more sort of our own family story, is you'll remember as well as I do that when I think I was maybe 3, you were 4 or 5, that mom went back to the community college. I mean, mom had a bachelor's degree in education, was a music teacher, then had you, and I think you were probably a handful. So
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah, I know. She decided to take a break, and then she was interested in computer programming and went back to school, brought us along. We played on the playground at Burlington County Community College in New Jersey. And the irony is that back then, I think it was okay for a parent just to leave their kiddos on site. I don't think that's okay.
We survived.
Barely. I think I'm still a little traumatized, but we'll save that story for another day.
I'm going to edit that out for mom. No, just kidding. Go
on. But I mean, just as we think about the student population at community colleges who aren't necessarily kids, a lot of colleges, at least here in Oregon, average age is 30, 31. The realities of an adult student are very different than a recent high school graduate. A lot of our students have families, they have jobs, they have to figure out transportation and childcare as a parent. And so it makes it more complicated. Even when community colleges are more affordable, there's still there's tuition and fees, but then you've got to factor in childcare, timing, transportation, work schedules. And so it's difficult for adults. And one of the projects I've been working on in Oregon with a lot of colleagues is a statewide effort to really help students maximize benefits and resources that can help them address some of those other costs beyond just tuition and fees for their coursework.
Yeah, the resources may very well be there. They often are. But if you don't know how to access them or what to do with them, then what's the point, right? I mean, that's, I've always felt, we talk so much about privilege, and privilege can come in a lot of forms. Oftentimes it comes in terms of race and not having to be exposed to the racism that so many of my friends of color have experienced their whole life. That's not an uphill battle for someone that looks like me and someone that looks like you. But part of that privilege too is having connections. Not just, hey, he's on TV,
social capital.
he works for, and he works. He's an administrator or was at community college or this or that. And it's like, we know that we're 1 or 2 phone calls away from not being rescued from any type of situation, but being able to call and say, hey, who do I go to for this? And so not everybody has that. And so that obviously becomes really purposeful. By the way, I'm sitting there thinking about, at what point does mom pause this podcast to call or text either me or you or both to either justify leaving us on the playground? She's gonna apologize, or she's gonna say, Mom, it's okay. Like we turned out okay, and it was a different time. But we recommend no one leaving their kids on the playground nowadays.
Right. And to sort of finish that story, if folks don't know, our mom had this incredible second career as a computer programmer with one organization that ended up becoming Bank of America, and she had this incredible career advancing
and leadership role. Went computer programmer to ultimately
to an executive,
leading a lot of teams. And so, I mean, it's actually truly an incredible success story, because when you talked about mom, going the education route, she was told as a kid, going through high school in the late 50s, somewhere from, it would have been like early 60s. late 50s, early 60s, that you and then you go off to college, and she went to a 4-year undergrad program, but that women basically are going to go into being teachers or nurses, and those were her options.
That's what her mom told her she could do.
That's what her mom told her she could do.
Yeah.
And what was our grandmother? She was a nurse, right?
And an educator.
And an educator. Yeah. So, mom went on to do incredible things. And those are the opportunities right now that I think other generations and are hopefully being exposed to, that anything is possible out there. I want to ask you, I mean, I know that you've found your purpose in helping so many people, and we're always looking to redefine or find that purpose. But I just remember that this is funny because we both went to the University of Wisconsin, and I'm 99.9% sure that you did not go there because of me. That's correct, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I don't even know why I didn't say 100%. And we had different interests, and we're very different and all that. We'll talk about that later, but I just remember you pursuing more the business path. And in many ways you did kind of go down that path. But then when I think about you in your, say, mid-20s, late 20s, I was always thinking about, he's involved in English as a second language and education. And so you kind of married this whole education, business, now workforce together. But I think one of the coolest things that you did was that you graduated from the University of Wisconsin, and you went off and made an impact, in some ways like you're doing now. I mean, it's maybe more hands-on, maybe a little different, maybe some similarities, I'm not sure. But you went off, I said it in the intro, to the Peace Corps, to West Africa. How did that experience shape you and your career path?
Yeah, I don't know how much I had an impact. I would say my West African Togolese friends and family had a profound impact on me and helped me see how much I enjoyed the teaching aspects of what I did there when I worked with a non-government organization that gave loans out to market women in my town, and we trained the women together. And I mean, that got me thinking more about a future career in education, but in particular adult education, because I had a room of like 45 women, and I had, just thinking of childcare again, we had some babies in the room, mom's nursing, we had toddlers. And what I learned just from an educator standpoint is the importance of adult education and teaching being meaningful and contextualized for your students. So in Togolese culture, there's a lot of storytelling. So as we were teaching business skills, we did a lot of storytelling, and that seemed to resonate. And also just understanding the context. There was one day where there was some political rally and the women had to leave and go to it, and I didn't really understand it, but my Togolese counterpart said, this just has to happen. And so just understanding your students, what's interesting to them, and making it meaningful. And so to me, and then I think at a larger way, coming back to the US and wanting to teach and figure out what I wanted to teach, and seeing how much all of us, all the Peace Corps volunteers and Americans and foreigners in Togo and across West Africa, I think, are treated with such respect and hospitality that I wanted to reciprocate that in some small way. So got into working with immigrant and refugees in our country, first in Baltimore and then the Bay Area, and now up in Portland. So, but I think, again, for adults in ESOL classes, like when I taught seamstresses who'd been laid off at Levi Strauss down in San Francisco, they were looking for new careers, better skills for their next job. So I think the integration of teaching English language skills with work and jobs sort of got me into the workforce development field, because then you're starting to talk to employers and understand what they're looking for, what skills they need. And that's a whole nother conversation of how to support employers in hiring, onboarding, upskilling their existing workers to support their businesses.
But isn't there a common thread too? I mean, if because I visited you over there for about a week and a half, which was one of the great trips of my life, because it forever gave me the smallest bit of understanding of what life was like there and what a different life was like. In the same way that just going over and visiting our troops overseas in Kuwait in 2018 gave me a taste of what it's like to be deployed in the Middle East. It's not like I lived that for a year, 2 years. It's just a handful of days, but it's just different when you can kind of feel and touch it and get that emotion. And I just remember such an incredible spirit over there. For people that don't know where Togo is, and you could certainly Google it and look it up on a map, it is, I always think the easiest way to describe it, you probably could do it better, is it's 2 countries west of Nigeria. I just say that because I think most people have heard of Nigeria, might have an idea of where it's at. And it's in between Benin and what, help me, and Ghana.
Yeah.
And amazing people, a lot of turmoil over there since politically, but I don't even know if it'd be a safe place to go anymore. For the most part, we were very safe, although there were some moments where I know there was a lot of corruption over at that point, but never felt in danger, just different. But the people, put aside all that, the politics and government and military and all those types of things, the people were the nicest people I'd ever met in my life. And I saw such a similarity in the sense that all anyone wanted over there was just to live an okay life, to provide for their families, to be able to be successful, but they didn't necessarily know how to get there. And I don't mean to overgeneralize. We met a lot of successful people over there, but just seeing like some of those women that you were teaching in that class, they had the work ethic, they had the skills, they had the want, but didn't always know how to connect those dots. But aren't there some similarities to that in our country too?
Maybe with the corruption and problems in our own society. I mean, I think that it's a different economy, so there weren't the same opportunities there. But I would say, I think the most profound learning I had was that the women that I worked with and taught, some of them had the equivalent of a formal elementary school education, middle school, high school, but they were some of the most brilliant individuals and minds. And I guess to me, that sticks with me people may have more formal degrees, but I've learned so much from the women that I worked with, and I always learn so much from the students I've had the chance to engage with here. But it's different. I mean, there are challenges here in helping those who haven't had the same opportunity because of systemic inequities in our society. The same way that there were power dynamics, there were they just don't have the same. They don't have the same economy and business, a prosperity that we have in this country, or the same resources as our government. So yeah, I mean, there's similarities. I think I don't know where I was going with that, but some similarities. Yeah.
So, you came back a changed person on a new path, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, and you mentioned Baltimore to San Francisco to Portland. I'm wondering, like, at what point did this sort of all click to you, or maybe that's just been an evolution over time? I mean, obviously you're not coming back saying, okay, one day I'm going to host a podcast. First off, we didn't have podcasts back then. I think you probably came back wanting to teach, but that path has gone from teaching to administration to now consulting and podcast host. I mean, how long did it sort of take this whole thing to crystallize? Because like in my case, I always felt like I was unique in the sense that I knew from the time I was 7, 8, 9 years old that this is what I wanted to do. That you had to listen to me yap all the time about sports, but I think I was saying at one point, you corrected me that, I always say in my speeches that I drive my teachers crazy telling everything that happened the night before. And you're like, just your teachers? I'm like, all right, fine, everybody around me. But I didn't know that the path would take me to being the pregame and postgame show host for the Kansas City Royals. That type of thing didn't even exist when we were kids. So like I always say that you could have dreams, and dreams are kind of a little bit cloudy, that you catch little bits of it, but it never quite turns out that way. and then everything clears over time, and you end up where you end up, if that makes any sense. So like I don't know what you dreamed of doing when you were high school, college, or even over in Togo, and then kind of how that all settled over time.
Yeah. Before I take a stab at that, can I go back to the last question and just try to add a little more?
I mean, you're the guest. You can do whatever you want.
Well,
within reason.
No, I feel like I didn't finish that thought. I think the history of colonialism in West Africa and many other parts of the world has left countries like Togo with fewer resources and access to capital, the same way that individuals in our American society, communities of color, those that are less educated, haven't had the same access to capital. So I think there's similarities there, and the impact and the limited paths or privilege, as you talked about. But that's a result of imperialism, capitalism, and policies that have benefited certain communities and not others. And that's in our own society and culture, but across the globe. So I think there's similar challenges, but not because people aren't brilliant or aren't working extremely hard. It's that they haven't had the same access to resources. If you get into the history of our own country, redlining, I mean, in Oregon over the last 20 years, like there's an average wage gap of a Black worker and a white worker. It's $5 an hour. I mean, you run the numbers, that's a lot. And that's, and then when people are going to school, right? So then you've got debt, and can you afford that? And then you get into further debt. So I think it's similar in a lot of ways, but maybe a different, I'm probably answering it in a different way than you asked the question, but that's what I think about in terms of similarities. I think to the question you just asked, I don't know if there was a moment like you had where this is what I wanted to do. I feel like it's just been, for me, just different choices that have led me to new opportunities, and with a lot of privilege. Out of grad school, I had a degree in ESOL education, was going to teach K to 12, but my wife and I moved to California. That led me into adult education, working for a nonprofit. Then we moved up to Portland, and I had done some work with a community college in San Francisco, and then had different roles at the a bunch of different roles at the community colleges. But I think what's been consistent, and you said this before, sort of the integration of education with business, which is the world of workforce. And then for me, having been an ESOL instructor, I feel like I'm an adult educator. So ESOL students, GED students within a community college setting, they're coming in a different door than maybe a traditional high school graduate, but have the same passion, goals, motivation, and interest in a better career with economic mobility. So it's been really enjoyable to advocate for students that historically have been marginalized because of their race, ethnicity, native language, education level, work experience in the last 15, 20 years.
So I got a few more questions before I get to my baseball theme questions, and I want to hit on the podcast too, but I hear this a lot, and I don't know if you have an answer for it, but it's certainly about workforce, because I talk to a lot of CEOs, and two of the biggest topics that come up right now, at least as we speak during a pandemic, and we're still technically in a pandemic, is can't find people to work. And then the other issue is supply chain. We won't mess with that one. But there's been such a massive disruption, and there's been disruption in the history of this country. I mean, Simon Sinek, who's one of my favorite followers, I had the chance to interview him last year, and he said, "Look, these are not unprecedented times. Sure, we've never lived through a pandemic, but we've had plenty of moments in the course of history, and we'll have more, where there was major disruption." And so I'm just curious your take on the workforce right now in general. When I hear And I'll hear some old school people saying that people don't even want to come to work anymore, which is like, well, wait a minute, maybe working from home is a better option. Maybe that helps with some of the childcare. Maybe for the first time in some people's lives, there is actually an alternative that makes sense, and that puts them on a path to being more successful that wasn't there before, versus but we've never done it that way before. And I mean, in the history of society, change is always difficult. I always like people say, well, people are slow to change in fill in the blank town. People are slow. People don't love change in Kansas City. People don't love change. In general, people are uncomfortable with change until they adapt to it and it becomes part of life. So where is this going with the workforce right now? I don't know if that's a fair question for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think as we're seeing within the last few months, this great resignation, a lot of people deciding to quit their jobs or find new jobs as a result of COVID and just this moment in time. And I think it's there's definitely this scramble for employers to find talent that they need. And I've heard so many employers talk about, we need to get kids excited about careers. And I mean, in Oregon, we're a big manufacturing state, in manufacturing or in healthcare, business, IT. But then there's also the need for workers to have a living wage so that they can afford to live here, say in the Portland metro area, which has gotten extremely expensive. I mean, we have large numbers of individuals that are housing insecure or houseless here. So it's sort of causing the disruption where employers are thinking about how to attract more talent and diversify their pool of talent. So maybe it's not just thinking about high school graduates who went to a university. Maybe they're connecting with a community college. Maybe they're developing an apprenticeship program. But part of it too is not just to bring them in the door, but retain your employees, because it's much more expensive for employers to go recruit and train and onboard new employees, as opposed to retain someone who then can advance into a better job and knows the culture. But there's a lot of systemic work. I mean, I've seen IT companies for years that are trying to recruit young college grads, and they had a kegerator in the break room and Friday, fun day with foosball and kombucha on tap and all these great things. But if that's just attracting white males who dominate the IT field and they feel comfortable and safe in that sort of hip environment, it's not doing, and maybe they're able to attract some new folks that are older, who are people of color, who are women. But if the culture's not inclusive and people don't feel like they belong, then they're leaving. So to me, it's a moment for employers to consider wages, benefits, culture. But I know there's another side to that, because there's a bottom line, and the recession and pandemic has impacted businesses where so many businesses haven't been able to make it. So for small and medium-sized businesses, how can they do that? How can they pay good wages and have those benefits and upskill their employees so people see a path to a better job, even if they come in entry level? And small and medium-sized businesses need the resources to be able to support that.
It's fascinating. I mean, I find myself just sort of watching, because I'm not necessarily in the middle of that, although I'm connected with a lot of people that are. And I just, it's a moment in time, I believe. And I'm really interested to see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, there's also a lot of biases across the board. I mean, it's part of our dominant culture. So even in higher education, back to the students I used to work with very closely, ESOL, GED students are non-credit, so they don't pay tuition. So back in the day, it was like, oh, those students can't get a library card because they don't pay the fees. It's like, but if we want them to start taking credit classes, why wouldn't we give them access to the library and to tutoring and all these things? So there's just systems in place that have benefited some and not others. I think there are biases in the workplace where employers naturally have had a requirement of a bachelor's degree for certain jobs. right? And those jobs when you look at the skills, they don't need a bachelor's degree. And in fact, by requiring a bachelor's degree, you're screening out a huge population of folks, many who are people of color, many who maybe don't have the same, education, but work experience. They may have the work experience, not the formal education experience, but how can you translate someone's previous work, assess it, and sort of give them the equivalent of that versus a degree where someone doesn't even have the work experience? So I think that those are some things, again, that employers can look at if they eliminated the requirement of certain formal degrees that maybe overweighted in their screening process and recruitment process.
All right, I want to ask you about the podcast. Before I do so, we should let everybody know, and I don't know that it's shown yet in this podcast. We'll get to the good brotherly stuff in a moment, but I'm the extrovert. Mark is the introvert, right? I'm 19 months older. Not that has anything to do with extroverted or introverted. And so, we're living in a day and age where it seems like everybody has a podcast. That's not true. But I remember back in the, early to mid 2000s, everybody had a blog until they didn't. But podcasting seems to be the way right now. And, anyone can do it. But I know that I remember you reached out to me sometime. I don't know if it was earlier this year or whenever it was, and said, I want to start a podcast. And I thought that was great. And, you had a pretty good plan of who you wanted to reach, what you wanted to do. My first question before I talk about the podcast is, that first time you jumped on the air, how nervous were you, or were you not?
No, I was nervous.
I figured.
Yeah. And I think the student I interviewed was as nervous. So we fumbled through together.
I just bring it up because, and I'm not sitting here telling everybody go start a podcast, but I do think that there's something about, if there's something you want to do and you're holding yourself back. I hear a lot of people now say, I've always wanted to write a book, but just go do it. Like, you got nothing to lose. We get in our own heads. And so you were probably in your head a little bit, but I also think that you were asking a lot of questions. You wanted to get everything right. And eventually you got going. And, I think I told you too, like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get going and you'll learn as you go. And I know that you're getting more comfortable. I'm guessing you don't get too nervous anymore. If you do, it's less than what it was before. But I know this was a passion and very important to you too. So I just want to ask you what your point or your purpose when you started All In Student Pathways Forward, what you were hoping to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to you for helping me get started and helping me navigate launching a podcast. That was tremendous. And the whole idea that I came up with was sort of something I took away from a state summit we had of community college leaders from all 17 colleges in Oregon as part of this initiative to connect students with benefits. And we were fortunate to have the former Secretary of Education in the Obama administration, John King Jr., visit us, and he would only come to Portland if he could host a student panel, and felt that it was really important to hear from students. And his message, which was incredible, was just listen to your students. Your students have the answers. They're navigating through your systems as students. So stop and listen to them, because many of us don't have the same lived experiences as our students, even if we went to community college, maybe 10, 15, 20, however long ago. So that resonated with me. Also felt like it would just be a great way to go deeper. We've had students on panels for state meetings, summits, and then even virtual. But a podcast was a way for me to really hear from students and understand not just their incredible stories and journeys into community college and what their goals are, what they've accomplished, but also their solutions, because there's a lot of need and opportunity to transform the way that we provide education, post-secondary education. What's working for students, what resources have been helpful, what staffing support's been helpful, and then what can we do more, particularly with policies that can be more inclusive and student-centered. So that's what it was about. It's been awesome because I have had the chance to talk to students from 8 or 9 different community colleges in Oregon, and it's primarily adult students. So it's not on the most part, recent high school graduate. I think I had one younger student who was a immigrant from Iraq who has a phenomenal story. But many of the other students I've all talked to are parent students. They're juggling work, families, school, and to hear what works for them and what they're looking for colleges to do more has been profound. And then the format is a little bit different than your podcast, where it features a community college student each episode. And then I have typically the president of that college on, or an executive leader who hears the interview with the student and then talks about that interview of what the college is doing well, what they could do more. And then I've been able to bring on a national person to get sort of broader perspective outside of Oregon. And that's been really fun. I just had someone on from the band Metallica's foundation. They've supported community colleges the last few years to promote the trades. And so one of the college students that I interviewed was a Metallica scholar because their college had that grant. So it's just been really interesting. And I learn so much from the students each episode.
I would just tell people you have Metallica on the podcast.
No, I didn't have Metallica, but their foundation, and they're phenomenal. I mean, the fact that they are supporting, I think it's 23, 24 colleges across the country, and each college has identified a program in the trades, and Metallica Foundation's funding is helping pay for books, for tools. The student I interviewed was in a machine tool program and had that resource for some of that equipment and tooling for his future career.
But I know that you've texted me or called me a number of times along with Metallica's foundation and some others. I mean, they would be, in my world, people that I don't know, but in your world that you do, saying, hey, I got a like from this community college, or I'm having this guest on. Like it's starting to get some traction beyond just Oregon. It's getting some national attention, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've got listeners from around the country, and the feedback I've gotten is just the conversations with the students are really powerful. I mean, just to hear from students, and not, when we've done panels, it's 5 students and each student answers 2 or 3 questions. I feel like I get, 10 to 15 questions with the students, and they're really pointing at what's working for them and what's not. And it's not specific to Oregon. I mean, another data point here, which may be news to you, but we know across Oregon community colleges, and this is like 8,000 students plus that responded, like 63% of our students have experienced some form of basic needs insecurity over the last year. That's either food insecurity, housing insecurity, or houselessness. 63%, and nationally that's 60% of community college students. So the realities for students right now, even at a very more affordable option than a university, these are realities that students are facing. So how can colleges create programs and support so students aren't having to choose between eating a meal and staying in school, right? Or like being able to have stable housing and then continue their studies. I mean, it's a catch-22 if we're not able to help students holistically, because they're sort of trapped. Like they want to go to school, get better skills for a better job, but they just need to stabilize, because it's really hard to focus on your studies if you're hungry or you don't have a place to sleep. So to me, like the podcast has really elevated those issues where I've talked to students who faced food insecurity, housing insecurity, and it's heart-wrenching. And at the same time, it's been promising to hear what colleges are doing creatively, and then also to hear what students are asking for. And in fact, the podcast was one of a number of strategies that we used during our last state legislative session, where we got a bill passed that is now providing funding for all of our community colleges and all 6 public universities, for each institution to have a benefits navigator who can help students identify where they may be able to access or maximize all these benefits and resources so they can focus on their studies.
If people want to learn more about the podcast, you can go to studentpathwaysforward.buzzsprout.com. Studentpathwaysforward.buzzsprout.com. We'll have that in the notes as well. Baseball themed questions. Let's run through these and then get to the fun brotherly stuff, the brotherly love, if you will. How about the biggest home run that you have hit professionally? I'm not talking about in the backyard. We'll deal with that in a moment. But what about in terms of career?
Yeah, I don't know if I have one moment. I would just say collectively, anytime I've had the chance to um, participate in or even speak at or just be a part of a student graduation. And again, for many of our adult students, it's been really powerful to me. So if that was ESOL students in San Francisco who completed a 6-month nursing refresher program because they'd been nurses in their home countries, they learned about the American healthcare system, they did some clinicals, and now they finished and they were ready to start a new nursing career here, all with their families. That's been a moment. But then the same when I had the opportunity to work with education programs at a few of the prisons in Oregon, where students were in custody and they got their GED and they had a big ceremony and their families were able to come and join in and celebrate with them. Other programs at the colleges that have paired foundational skills with business skills, like an accounting certificate or a welding certificate, and just the chance to see students succeed and to celebrate with their families and just to be a part of that. To me, it's not one home run, but that's what is motivating to me and inspiring in seeing the transformation that the community college system has on families. And another example, like a GED graduation, when I worked at Mount Hood, I mean, we had 18, 19-year-old kids graduating with their whole family, grandparents, parents, siblings there. But then the reverse, where there were grandparents who were getting their GED in their 60s and 70s, and their grandkids were cheering them on. So I guess that's a weird home run, but to me, that's what I really enjoy about this work, and seeing the impact that it has on individuals and their families.
Yeah, there's a lot of purpose and reward there. How about a swing and a miss, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, that's a good one too. I would say similarly, I don't have a moment. I feel like I try my best, have tried my best as a leader to listen attentively to people I work with closely on my team, partners or individuals that I collaborate with. I guess a lesson learned. Well, I don't have one moment, but there have been times where I haven't listened to my gut and I've known what the right decision is. And if it's in, a certain decision, it may have to do with hiring or just a choice with a program decision. And I've always balanced like listening to colleagues and teammates, and then also knowing sort of what I feel in my gut. And there's never one right way, but I feel like looking back, I've definitely heard it and not followed through with sort of what my gut or intuition is telling me. But again, I don't know if that's a swing and a miss. That's just a lesson learned, that we sort of, we have our own intuition in our gut. And for me, it's important to remember that when I listen to my intuition, it's usually on, but at the same time, recognizing the importance and value of listening to colleagues.
Yeah, no, those are good lessons. And listening, such an important skill to others and even to yourself sometimes. I like a CEO that I know real well here in town. I wrote about in my book, named Peter Clune, from a big company named Lockton, and he took over during the pandemic, leading people all over the world. And he liked the approach of saying it's better to be interested than interesting. And so I think about that a lot, just in terms of listening. I mean, we all have stories, and so much of what you've been talking about too, in terms of the podcast, in terms of back in Africa, in terms of these graduations, it's all storytelling. I mean, that's how you reach people, and when you learn about them, and you can pass those on. So anyway, my 2 cents with that. Final baseball theme question: small ball. What are the little things that lead to the big results for you?
Yeah, I think it's a really great metaphor for policy change. So that may sound weird to you, but just having been involved in work at our state level and some national work related to workforce, policy change takes time, and it takes collaboration and engagement. And I feel like for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been, I don't know, hitting singles, and we haven't had a win, but we've started to garner interest and support in the issues of students facing basic needs insecurity, getting legislators to understand it more deeply at the local, state, and national level, and then brought in some key partners in our state: anti-poverty organization, student association, and all of that this past year led to the bill I just talked about, in a session in Oregon where there wasn't a lot of revenue to go around, and we don't have a sales tax in the state. It's a complicated tax structure. It's a purple state, so blue in the Portland area, red rural, and most of the rest of the state. So to get that win was a lot of small ball of advocacy, bringing students for that storytelling, bringing in partner agencies, and just continuing to work on it, and sort of elevate these issues to lead to one policy when there's a ton more work. So I think it's constant, the small ball, in terms of advocating and policy for systemic change and for additional resources for those who haven't had access.
It's a metaphor that really can apply to anything. I guess that's why I might have used that to write a book about, and why I love that question. And it was really inspired by the Royals not being the big market home run hitting team. Not that they can't hit home runs, but yeah, I don't think the policy that you're talking about and the change that you're talking about comes from a home run swing. Maybe a home run swing at the end to send it over the finish line, to use a different sports expression, but it's day after day. And really, to me, small ball was meant to be about culture. Culture takes investment and attention every single day, and it's usually to the little things. All right, let's wrap things up. 4 final questions as we round the bases.
I know you usually do your round the bases, but I figure as a fellow podcaster and your younger brother here, maybe I'll grab the mic and do a different version. And as we were kids, as opposed to just rounding the bases, we used to play
is this where you air your grievances of being
no. What was the game where you'd have 2 people like throwing the ball back and forth, and you had to get to the base, like playing, what was that? I had it before, I can't remember.
We used to play like a pitcher catcher type of game. Didn't we do that in the backyard?
I'll think of it.
You're not talking about like a rundown, like getting caught in a pickle.
No, we played something. But anyway, instead of just 4 bases, I got a bunch of questions. So figure we'll have some fun here, and we may debate a little bit, but I'll just start us off, and feel free to add to it. So
it's good. I didn't have any questions ready for you anyway, so go ahead.
All right. So from our childhood, since you talk a lot about small ball, who was the home run king of our backyard wiffle ball league, you or me?
It had to have been me. Was it not?
It was.
I was pretty good. I was pretty good wiffle ball player.
And little league home run hitter. I had the small ball, like chop, Pete Rose, get your singles and doubles, and you swung for the fence. So
it's funny though, because I was Pete Rose was my favorite player, and I think you probably, for those that don't know, we grew up in New Jersey outside of Philadelphia before moving to Chicago when we were, or at least when I was a teenager. You weren't quite a teenager yet, but I think, wasn't Mike Schmidt your favorite player?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny because Mike Schmidt was your favorite player and Pete Rose was my favorite player, but you were the singles hitter and I was the home run hitter. By the way, when I talk about being a home run hitter, like that ended well before anybody would have. I mean, I was like a great home run hitter in T-ball and Little League.
Well, and in our backyard wiffle ball league,
which, by the way, we had a great wiffle ball backyard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a tough field for someone like me that was left-handed, because most of what would be right field was our house. But if you got it over the roof, you could land into a corner of the neighbor's fence. If you hit it up against our fence, it probably went into Dad's garden, which was a ground rule double. The fence to get it into there was about 1 foot high. And so if it landed in there, it was a ground rule double. Do you remember I don't know if she's alive. I assume no one in the family would be listening, but do you remember the somewhat temporary rule about hitting a home run over the fence from Mrs. Woodworth, the neighbor?
No.
There was a stretch where she decided, at least this is the way my memory serves, when we were 10, 11, 12 years old, whatever, that if we hit a home run over her fence, it was an automatic out because she was upset that we were not inviting her sons, Pat and Matt, to play. Or I don't know if that was a recurring thing or not. So it was an automatic home run if you hit it over the fence, which is like a nightmare for a kid that just wants to go yard. And so we would silently round the bases and not make any noise, hoping that she didn't hear or see it.
I don't remember that, but I would say, because we both are lefties, but I bat righty. So like one of the few, Ricky Henderson, probably the last player in the majors.
Not the last.
One of maybe,
He
but
was the best.
You had the house into right field, but it was a closer home run, dead center, and
short porch. For
left, it went further, and there was a big tree, so I would hit the tree and didn't hit as many dingers. But I think the funniest memory of our wiffle ball in the backyard, do you remember what second base was?
Oh no, was it like it
was like Dad's bug trap. It was like a little thing planted in the ground, and it was like collecting bees or wasps or flies, and we'd like slide into it. The whole thing would collapse, but that was second base.
Sounds scary.
Yeah. All right. So we got that one. How about this one for more baseball? So we grew up playing this card game, Stratomatic Baseball, dated.
Still around now.
Is it? So a lot of memories of playing Stratomatic Baseball with you. Who cheated at Stratomatic Baseball growing up as kids, you or me?
I was a pretty honest kid. I think it was probably you.
Yeah, I was honest too, but I was definitely competitive. So yeah, I cheated. Sorry.
I don't know why, but for some reason, I think my favorite Stratomatic player was Rance Mullenix.
Detroit Tigers? No,
that's Toronto, Lance Parrish. Lance Parrish. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, that was fun. All right, so we've talked about jobs after college. I mean, I actually feel like your first job in Rhinelander, Wisconsin was pretty fascinating, and a different cultural experience similar to me with the Peace Corps. So I think we both had interesting jobs. How about this one? Who was a better student growing up, you or me?
It has to be you, right?
Yeah, I think so. You were
sorry for the pause. I don't even need to have Colleen edit this out, but just like the world of like our world, I got a text from your nephew, from my son, as we're recording. Did you see blah, blah, blah? Like I would have done. We didn't have texting back then. Did you see this player? Did you hear this news? And I said no. And so he tried to FaceTime in, but I'm going to text him that I'm on a podcast. I'm sure you were a better student.
Yeah, I think so. You were more social class clown, and I was the serious one. Who's a bigger Philadelphia sports fan, you or me?
Wait, but didn't the Pet Shop Boys sing a song about us? I've got the brains, you've got the looks. But anyway,
we'll get into fashion in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah,
you got more.
Bigger Philadelphia sports fan.
Well, I mean, I think growing up it was equal, like 100% equal. I mean, growing up it was you were 100% in, I was 100% in. It didn't matter whether it was the Philadelphia Eagles, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Philadelphia Phillies, which we went to more Phillies games than anything, but we went to all of it. Or who did I miss?
Sixers.
The Sixers. Even like the Philadelphia Fever, the indoor soccer league, the Philadelphia Stars, which was the USFL team, head coach Jim Mora.
Chuck Ficino was a QB.
I think that's right. But I think that, once I got into the business, like the last Philadelphia sports team that I was a diehard, win or lose, everything's on the line, was the 1993 Phillies that lost on that awful Joe Carter home run. Joe Carter, by the way, lives now in Kansas City. I didn't have the heart to tell him how much he broke my heart the first time I met him, but
him.
Yeah, but what happens is that this becomes work. It's the greatest work. But I when I realized this is when I was working in St. Louis, and it was the NFC Championship after the 2001 season, so it would have been like January of 2002, and it was the Eagles, and the Rams in the NFC Championship, and I'm sitting in a press conference room, and they bring in Donovan McNabb and Andy Reid to talk for the Eagles. And I just remember thinking, like, this is my childhood team. And if they win, that'd be cool. They could win a Super Bowl. But if they lose, I get to go to New Orleans and cover the Super Bowl. And I know every guy on the Rams, and I don't know anybody on the Eagles. And that's when it dawned on me that I wasn't a fan anymore. You've never given that up.
Yeah, I mean, that's not my profession. But looking back, it's interesting because we were equally big fans, but I think we had our sports. Like, you were definitely more a Flyers and a Phillies fan, and I was more Sixers and Eagles fan.
Yeah, and then the irony, not irony, but that's pretty telling, because to this day, my two favorite sports are baseball and hockey.
And mine are, I watched the most probably basketball.
Yeah,
actually, last night the Sixers played Portland, so I couldn't watch, but it's tough to not follow along, but I'll watch it later. So, okay, so we got that sports. And how about this? Getting back to mom and dad. So who takes after mom staying up late? Who takes after dad falling asleep early?
Oh, I mean, I'm up late. I guess I always blamed it on the late night hours of my job, but or maybe I just inherited that from mom. And I don't know, do you fall asleep early?
I do. I'm the first one in my family with teenage kiddos.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, it's hilarious. And even years ago, like, the phone would ring when we had landlines at like 10:30 here, 11 o'clock. And it'd just be like, oh, it's your brother, Mark. I'm like, yeah, who else is calling this late? And you'd be like coming off of a game with a story about some play or player you got to interview. And so, yeah, definitely you're the night owl and I fall asleep early.
Sometimes you will text me late at night and I'm actually falling asleep. So, but it's like 11 there and 1 at my place. So,
yeah.
All right. What else do you got?
Who's a better driver, you or me?
I don't know. I'm assuming you're more responsible than me.
I don't know. I think that one, yeah, that could go either way. I feel like you've driven with me, I've driven with you. I would say the memory I have where you were definitely not a good driver is when we were in Deerfield driving home in high school, and I think we had some argument, and we were at like a red light. You were driving, and we got into fisticuffs. You remember that?
No, I remember getting on a fight on the bus going to grade school once. Do you remember that?
No.
So somewhere, I don't know if it was like first and third grade, kindergarten, whatever it was, we all I know is you and I got in some kind of a fight on the school bus, and we both got sent to the principal's office before the day started.
Nice.
And I don't remember any other details. I don't really remember a fight in the car though.
Okay. So who was more fashionable in high school?
Me. I'm not saying I'm anything special. I'm not saying I'm anything special, but I think that's been the case for our whole lives.
Maybe.
Although we got some pictures pretty young where it's pretty safe to say that, somebody wasn't dressing us well.
Yeah, maybe I had some badass clothes as a kid.
Yeah, like Garanimals or what?
Some of that 70s stuff. With like the curly hair too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you got that for red.
All right, so who won the wrestling matches we had when mom and dad left us home alone when we were little in New Jersey?
Pretty sure I beat the crap out of you on a regular basis.
But I got you back, and that's a good story where I think at one point, I think I hit my head or you hit my head on like something like the dresser or like the bed frame. And I decided if I couldn't beat you, because you were bigger than I always was, if I couldn't beat you with strength, that I would beat you with my mind. So I pretended to cry, and I ran downstairs and I grabbed the ketchup bottle and I squirted it in my hair and came back upstairs and told you I was bleeding. And that was well worth the years of losing wrestling matches to see the look on your face.
We did a lot of wrestling, though.
We watched a lot of that. It was bad.
Watched a lot of that garbage. You remember I split my forehead open trying to jump off of the top dresser onto my bed like Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and I missed and hit like the metal around the frame or something and had to go to the hospital.
But you had like fashionable clothes on, so it was all good.
Right. I don't know that anything was fashionable. Probably people now that know me that would say I'm not either, but anyway. Anything else, or we gonna wrap this up?
No, I think that's all I got.
I mean, I was gonna ask you better taste in music, but that's pretty subjective.
Yeah, I feel like that one's debatable. I mean, I know I have better taste, but I feel like you've got pretty good taste in music.
I got good taste
And
in
you've
music.
introduced me to bands, and I've introduced you to bands, right?
Yeah, I know I upset you one night. For some reason, I can remember I was with our grandparents, Papa and Grandma, in Atlantic City when Jerry Garcia died, and you were like the biggest among millions of other people, deadheads in the world, and I didn't like their music. I've come around to like it, but I think on the same night or somewhere around there, I could be making this up. The 76ers drafted Jerry Stackhouse, which was a huge deal. And I think I made some really insensitive comment to you, like, well, at least the Sixers drafted Jerry Stackhouse.
I don't remember that.
And you were livid because that was a death that rocked any Deadhead fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, well, I will say that this could be the first conversation that Mom's ever heard between us where we didn't fight.
Probably, but we'll get the chance soon for the holidays.
Thanksgiving.
Right?
We'll get a little fighting in over Thanksgiving just so that she feels at home. But there's a lot of fun and some good memories too. It's interesting that there's some things I threw out there that you don't remember, and there's some things that you threw out there that I don't remember.
Totally.
I kind of remember the ketchup thing. Kind of. Do you remember the time when I almost got the crap kicked out of me because we were playing flashlight tag again back in the day where you could run around the neighborhood in the dark, and we used to play flashlight tag at night. And, it was the summer. It's a late night. It was just getting dark, and I took one of Dad's tomatoes and threw it at a car going by, and it was some 19-year-old kid that came out and was ready to beat the hell out of me.
No, I don't remember that. No,
yeah, I think I ran into the woods.
Whoa. I mean, I do remember a lot of fun memories going to Phillies games at the Vet, and you'll remember this story. Like it's Philadelphia, so a lot of soft pretzels. So there were soft pretzels vendors outside. This is a good one. And
rough town.
You were probably 7 or 8, and we were leaving, and someone was selling,
pretzels, $5 for $1.
$5 for $1, and you blurted out in your loud broadcasting, even young voice, like, "They're stale." Yeah. And the guy came running at you. Was like, "Well, your head's stale," and Mom and Dad.
I remember. I actually remember that. I think that Dad was legitimately scared. Right.
I mean, Philly, they boo Santa Claus, so 8-year-old kids.
Yeah, they booed Santa Claus. They booed Darren Dalton's toddler on father son, father child. Anyway,
have you seen
I like that this is just running on, Yeah. Oh, the Manning brothers.
Well, no, but I haven't seen that. But Eli Manning has a description of Philadelphia fans that's hilarious. I mean, it's terrible, but he describes it as like a little kid who's got 2 birds up.
Yeah. It's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I would say.
But thanks for having me on, Joel. It's been fun.
I should let everyone know again that if they want to learn more about the podcast, studentpathwaysforward.buzzsprout.com, and the podcast is called All In Student Pathways Forward. It'll be in the show notes, but if you just go and search for All In Student Pathways Forward, you'll find that out. Mark is first and foremost has the honor of being my younger brother, but more significantly, he is the principal and CEO at Skills Strategy Consulting. Mom, I hope, and Dad for that matter too, but he doesn't say as much. I hope that you enjoyed this interview and that you learned something about your sons, although I'm pretty sure that there is nothing in this conversation that they didn't already know.
Fair enough.
Is that fair? All right. Thanks, Mark. I'm proud of all of your success, and hey, we both have podcasts. That's pretty cool too. So now keep doing what you're doing. I know you're making an impact in the world.
You as well. Thanks, Joel.
All right. Thanks, Mark.